Hello and welcome to the Smells Like Infinite Sadness podcast. I'm your host, Michael Taylor. For those of you who don't know, I run the website, smellslikeinfinitesadness.com. It's a blog covering the best alternative rock from the 80s and 90s up to present day. I'm a proud middle-aged Gen Xer who is still obsessed with the music of his youth and loves to talk about it. So this week, I'm going to change tactic. I know I've been doing interviews the past few weeks, and I've talked to everyone from Bauhaus, Kevin Haskins, to Monster Magnus, Dave Windorf, and so on. I've got several that I'm working on right now, but if you follow my blog, smellslikeinfinitesadness.com, and read it regularly, you'll know I've got a segment called Albums Revisited, where I look at albums from my youth that really influenced me, some of my favorite ones over the years, and also I like to look at albums by year. I've done the best of 1987, the best of 1991, 1992, and so forth, and I thought instead of doing a blog list, this time I would try it on a podcast format. And I'm going to tackle 30 albums turning 30 this year, so that'll be 1988. We're going to talk about the best albums from that year, some most groundbreaking albums, ones that have definitely stood the test of time, that were very influential on me and on other musicians and just on the culture in general. And to do that, I'm going to have a guest with me today. It's my old friend, Chris Logan. I've known him all the way since grade school. He was always one of the guys who was always in the know on current music. He was working at record stores ever since I knew him, and always had those release dates handy, and just a very, very good tastemaker. Always just a really great frame of reference for music history, especially during the era that we grew up in. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to cover our 30 favorites, 15 from me, 15 from him. And to give you an idea of 1988, just before we get started here, it was the end of the Reagan era, right before Judge H.W. Bush took office. So it was a very conservative time. It was a very... especially in Texas, it was even more conservative. Grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. And because of that, music was a very important outlet, something to piss off your parents, something to kind of take you out of your head. And 1988 was full of great albums that were very controversial, groundbreaking, really kind of stretched the limits of what was acceptable at the time. And so we've got a lot of good stuff to cover here, so we're going to get to that. So sit back and enjoy the best albums of 1988, and afterwards I'll be back for you Spotify listeners, and I'll have a playlist of some of the best albums that we've talked about here. And yeah, sit back and enjoy. Well, I think I'm going to kick it off with my favorite album of 1988, and that is The Church Starfish. That is probably the one album that if I had to pick one album from '88, only one, it would be really, really hard. But I think it had to be Starfish. I have so many memories of that album, and I think it was just such a cool introduction to that band. Because I heard of The Church, and I remember seeing like 120 Minutes a long time, like before, a couple years before that, like something off Heyday, but I didn't really quite get into them just yet. And of course, Under the Milky Way came out, and it was the biggest they ever got, and they didn't stay big for that long. But that was such a cool. Cool album, and I guess it was kind of a really weird mix. It was very psychedelic, and it was very trippy, but it had that kind of post-punk thing, so it didn't go on for too long. It wasn't too out there. It was more kind of economical, I guess, in that way. You know, if you could...
it really was a super melodic record too. I mean, and I remember for here. Did you go? Were you still living here? You still were living here whenever that record was around, right?
Yeah, I was. I switched schools, but yeah, I was in Fort Worth all the way up to like the early '90s. So yeah, so I was definitely still here.
So the church opened. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't say this. Peter Murphy opened up for the church.
I'm glad you brought this up. I was going to bring this up too. I'm glad you remembered.
And I recall this. It was a Q102 carload concert.
Mm-hmm.
And so you paid, I don't know what it was, $10 or whatever it was for the car.
Yeah, $10 a carload.
People to get into the show. It had I don't think there was any restriction. Like, however close you could get, it was a free for all.
Yeah, I think it was.
I don't remember it being seat assigned at all because.
No, it wasn't.
I think we were fairly close for that show. And I recall Peter Murphy playing Purple Rain.
Yes, yeah, I did too. I remember that. I remember that exactly. People started going crazy because he went into Bela Lugosi's Dead for like one bar, then he came out of it. And everybody's all bummed out.
Right. Yes, and then Purple Rain happened, and I think Peter Murphy went longer than he was supposed to, so that kind of shortened the church set. Regardless, the church put on a wonderful, wonderful show.
Yeah, that was like the first time I'd ever seen him, and
Yeah, it was the first time, and I don't want to say it was the only time because I don't remember for sure. I think I saw him again, like a couple years later. But yeah, so
yeah, that was a big. Yeah, I remember also with that tour. I've read several things online where like Peter Murphy and the church, they definitely did not get along, and that because of that kind of stuff.
right.
They were
And
not.
that makes total sense.
And
that makes total sense.
But yeah, it's just one of those albums. I think it's like every song is good. I mean, it's definitely one of those albums where where people they focus on like on the Milky Way, and secondly Reptile, which was a kind of a minor hit. But it's one of those albums where really any song, if they had pushed it, probably could have been a hit because they were all very catchy, had a really cool sound to it, and just had that really something about those.
Oh, the whole record. The whole record is a timeless record, if you ask me. It really is. It captures a lot of. If you didn't know what the church was, you caught the best of them right there.
Yeah, it was like a perfect introduction. It really was, and kind of
absolutely.
It was kind of in between, where they were a little more probably psychedelic and stuff before that, but then they went really over the into more experimental stuff after that. But it's a really good in between point, and the guitar work is just flawless. I mean, it's just so. The mixing is so great.
Totally agree.
And it really bums me out when I talk to Steve Kilby and some of these guys from the church that they don't think they really appreciate what fans like about it. I think he's very dismissive of it. I think maybe he just wishes that it was more than just one song that got so much of exposure.
Yeah.
But it's just a great album.
If they go back and actually review the actual full album as a whole, that's a great record, man. And it's a great record.
And it's got such a great intro and exit because it starts off with Destination, which is a very kind of Pink Floyd, very kind of dark and menacing, and then it ends with Hotel Womb, which is one of the most like uplifting and kind of trippy, and so it's a really cool mix of that.
So good.
All right, so where do you want to talk? What album do you want to talk about now?
You just want to start with the first one, Surfer Rosa.
Yeah, let's do Surfer Rosa. That was a huge one, for sure.
Yes, it was. It was a tremendous record. It was really the launch, I think, for a lot of what we would know as the independent movement in the 90s.
Absolutely. I mean, there would
be... it's such a linchpin, and how many people have said that the Pixies influenced them were insane. Even the guys, the bands that would say that this was at least the Pixies were such a huge influence on them. And you got to start somewhere. And what better place than Surfer Rosa,
Definitely one of those albums. It's kind of like the Ramones' first album. Like, it may not have sold like millions of copies, but everybody that bought it, Nirvana. There would be no Nirvana without the Pixies. I think that's been pretty well established. That so that kind of tells
very well documented.
Tells you all you need to know right there.
Well, that Surfer Rosa was just 4AD, and it was an import. I remember trying to find it as an import cassette. There's a band from Boston that I had to find on an import cassette.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
I mean, what kind of ridiculousness is that?
4AD wasn't cheap either.
No, 4AD was not cheap. That was like a $15 cassette. $15 cassette at that point. So, and
crazy.
Yeah, I mean the EPs ran. Let's see, because I think we ended up finding Come On Pilgrim for around. Well, it was around 10. But and that felt okay because it was a pretty. I mean, it was a little bit better than an EP should have been. It was 6 or 7 tracks or something like that. But being able to score the full length album that Surfer Rosa would be, which I think what's funny is because it was released domestically after Doolittle came out in 1989, I think. It was a pretty close release. So,
I didn't
but
realize
the
that.
yeah, I'm thinking that it was 1989. There was a reissue on. Let's see what I'm trying to think what label it was. Elektra kind of is in my crook on it, but I don't know if that's right. But they picked up the re-release on Surfer Rosa, and that was pretty huge. Even because the album cover had the topless Mexican dancer on it.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
I think they kept that. They didn't blur it out or anything like that. So that was good on them for keeping the continuity of the art that went along with the original 4AD. But I mean, still, Surfer Rosa, Where's My Mind? Who doesn't know that song now? You know.
That's one of those weird things where like a song became a hit so many years after because of Fight Club, kind of brought it back.
Yeah,
it shows you just kind of how much staying power that song has, and
yeah, it certainly is one of those songs that you're like, it still has so much life now, even in 2018.
Yeah.
I think I've heard it in a commercial or maybe even another film since. So, it's the long-standing the way the Pixies melody still works in 2018 for being a record 30 years ago.
Yeah, you could argue it maybe the most influential album on this list. Really, at least one of them for sure.
Oh yeah, easily. I think I would totally agree with that. It's highly influential. With the very sublime way that it influenced so many other independent artists. And it wasn't a complicated record at all, and it wasn't a highly produced record.
No.
Yeah. Did Steve Albini do that one?
I think he did. I think he did produce that one. I'm pretty sure.
So Steve Albini's very well known for just do it once or don't do it at all. At least at that point, it was a very, very much a get it right the first time or move on to the next track. And so, maybe he's a little bit more lenient now. I don't, I haven't worked with him, but
he's a little bit of a stickler, at least.
I've heard that. I actually there's a couple guys that I know that did a track with Steve Albini, and it was just as much as what you would think working with Steve Albini would be. It's no nonsense. It's get to it, get the track finished. I think he might have been okay with maybe a little bit of, okay, let's try that again. But there are no overdubs. There's no like going back to layer. You don't. It's anti-Eno, kind of like what we were thinking about with Eno. Yeah, It's anti-Eno. It's not tape loops. It's not the Frippism, you know. So, yeah, good old Steve Albini is a good portion of what made that album, I think, successful. Get it right the first time, raw, energetic, super songs. Gosh, Pixies, Surfer Rosa, damn good record. Damn good record.
And speaking of 4AD, I guess we could also mention another album that year. I was big for that label, which is the Cocteau Twins' Bluebell Knoll, which is another really good album from that year. It was pretty much, I think, my first album I really could kind of appreciate them, because I heard friends play him like in car rides and stuff like that, but that's the first time I really got to hear him album all the way through, and it was just such a cool, because I think it came out, I feel like it came out close to summer. If not, it seems like a summer album to me, because I remember playing a lot while I was driving, and it just had such a cool sound. Like Robin Guthrie's guitar tone and his guitar style was just such a unique, huge, just such a and that with Elizabeth Fraser's vocals obviously are just like an amazing combination. So I don't have a whole lot to say about the album as a whole, because it kind of all bleeds together. But that was a really strong album from that year, and definitely one of my favorites by them too. Had a really nice.
Absolutely, yeah. They were always like an anchor to the entire 4AD sound, because I mean Pixies were not of this earth on the 4AD. Cocteau Twins and those other bands like This Mortal Coil and what have you that were doing that like The Dead Can Dance, and that they were that's 4AD sound. Pixies were not 4AD sound. That's what made that one, I think, a really, that's a standout for 4AD. That's whenever they started to move in different strange direction. But the Cocteau Twins were the sound of 4AD, hands down, in my opinion.
Yeah, like I think that Heaven for Las Vegas is probably my favorite of their late 80s albums. But or I guess it's 19. Is that 80? Is it 1989, 1990, 89, something like that? But this
I thought it was 90, but I mean 89 might be right.
But this was definitely a really strong one, and one that I definitely like to listen to, and still has a great sound to it. And if we're going to talk about nude women on album covers, I guess we should also mention Jane's Addiction's Nothing Shocking, and get that one in there too, which was very controversial at the time for an album of.
Oh, it's super, yeah.
It was super
controversial.
It was like Perry Farrell took his girlfriend, made like these cast of her, and made twins of his girlfriend, like images, and then set her on fire. That freaked a lot of people out in the
Hey, you know what? Who doesn't want to do that, right? I mean, come on. Hey, hold still. Let me make a cast of you, and then set your hair on fire. I'm sure mine would be super thrilled to hear that. Hey, hold still. Yeah, I would get that look of hell.
And that's
good for Perry, though.
Yeah, and that's another album, just like Surfer Rosa, that was hugely influential on the 90s. I mean,
tremendous. I mean, that's a record that spawned basically I honestly think that was the idea that it got Perry thinking about Lollapalooza. What can I do artistically, not just musically, but artistically, to push the envelope. I mean, of course, you have Ritual de la Habitual as the next record, but I think you're starting with the genesis on Nothing Shocking,
and
because that's such a huge record.
And you really see a lot of different styles combining there because, you know, you've kind of got a little bit of goth sound in there, but you also have this kind of
Oh yeah,
classic rock guitar stuff that Dave Navarro's doing. And I kind of feel like that Jay's Addiction kind of took like what the Cult were doing on Love and just ran with it and took it in a weirder direction
yeah,
and heavier and stranger. Is basically what, you
yeah.
know, with that, you know, they definitely had that kind of post punk aesthetic, but there was definitely some big arena rock stuff in there too. There was a really weird mix of that, which I think is what made it so popular. That, you know, you could be a goth kid and get into it, or you could be a metal kid and you could appreciate it too. I think is what made them so unique in that way.
Yeah, it was that weird record. How do you really promote this album? Because it's heavy and it's not heavy, and then it's melodic, but then it's heavy. And what do we do with this album? I mean, it came in at the right time because there was so much, you know, sort of transfusion going on from the metal crowd into what was formerly known as college rock, and
Mm-hmm.
starting to, you know, and starting to filter into what we now know as alternative, and what we term as alternative now. But it was such it was in that weird transitional period. I can only imagine how strange it might have been for the guys in Warner Brothers, who I think were the main, that was the main label.
Yeah.
Where do we put this record? And they just happened to hit it in the, what was the college rocks, you know, nook of it, and then just let it be where it was, you know, because it was a super heavy record at times, but it still had so much melodic and dynamic stuff in it that I'm not even sure how it really worked for them in an office. Super great that it did what it did, because I was all over that record,
Yeah.
all over it.
Yeah, me too. I think one thing that they were really smart at, Perry Farrell's very smart at, was it's very provocative. I mean, you have songs about serial killers, you got a song about Ted Bundy, you got a song about, you know, very sexual stuff, you got a song about, you know, very blasphemous stuff. It was, they really cover the gamut
Oh yeah,
of stuff that a lot of metal artists, you know, push the envelope like that. I think that was a huge part, you know, the album cover, everything else. They were definitely not afraid to push the button. And in the 80s
so
America,
yeah,
that
yeah,
was easy to do to freak people out, and they freak people out pretty easily.
yeah, and the '80s were puritanical compared to what it is today. You
Yeah.
know, with trying to come up with, you know, some sort of grading system on what the kids should and should not hear, and parents beware, you know, parents beware of the Jane's Addiction album that's got like certain, you know, topless naked, you know, triplets with their hair on fire. Beware.
And just the album,
Great
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Perry still, I mean, you know, Lollapalooza is not what it is today as it was back then, but I still think Perry Farrell deserves a lot of, I don't know I don't know exactly how to say it, but I guess honor on bringing some sort of, geez, I'm not even sure how to actually
well,
but
he was
you know,
he was able to,
crossing the boundaries of what, you know, high art, low art, and just melodic metal. You
yeah,
know, put it all together. You know,
he was
put it all together, and he did it.
really had a way of picking all the best parts out of different stuff and sticking it together. And then the band, you know, between Dave Navarro and Stephen Perkins on drums and Eric Avery on bass. I mean, the bass on that album, the bass, just like the Pixies, the bass is just as important as any other element on the album. Those are really bass driven records, I think. that are.
Yeah, Eric Avery is fantastic on that record. He's a standout.
Really, really solid. So where should we head next? Which one do you want to tackle?
Well, I kind of like to hit on the Sonic Youth Daydream Nation.
Yeah, let's do that one.
That one for me is a that's a real door opener, honestly, because it was a record that just opened me up into all the independents. You know, it was one of those. It was the last video of a 120 minutes. You know, the Sunday night thing that the MTV used to play.
Oh yeah.
120 minutes. You know, and then they're going to talk about. You know, we have a new video from Sonic Youth, and it's the very last video. You know, it's 11. I don't know, 50, 45, whatever it is. And the last song is Sonic Youth playing Silver Rocket.
It's a great song.
And I never really heard Sonic Youth that much, you know. I've heard of, but not really. But it was literally one of those days that after I heard Sonic Youth Daydream Nation, or Sonic Youth Silver Rocket, that I went out the next day and I bought that cassette. And that cassette stayed in my tape deck for probably the next 3-6 months. I might have reversed it out with a handful of things here and there. You know, it was my personal doorway into, oh, so there is a whole bunch of other stuff beneath the major labels, and I didn't think of it like that, you know, in that type of way, but because I knew about the Husker Do's, and I knew about, you know, all, you know, your Fugazis and your Minor Threats. I knew about those guys. And they were great. And I did really like them. But Sonic Youth, for something, just really pushed me more towards that sound. And still today, if you sound like any of those Sonic Youth, Dinosaur Jr.'s, Jawbox, you know, those sounds I gravitate to immediately, and it all stems from this. Such a huge record for me.
And you're talking about, I mean, their guitar stuff was so intense, and the way they had those weird alternate tunings, which is something that became very popular in the 90s. Another thing that they've kind of, you know, predated and kind of, you know, I think influenced lots of bands like Soundgarden and stuff like that who did the alternate tunings. But also you've got another bass player, much like, you know, Kim Deal. I mean, Kim Gordon was a very influential figure, and there's a lot of strong
Iconic.
Yeah, strong personalities in that band that made them really, I think, really exciting for people. And they never were a huge band. Like they didn't cross over in the way that like a Nirvana did, but they were. I mean, as far as like college rock was concerned, and they really, you know, I think pushed that experimental element, that you can make experimental music but still be really catchy and accessible. I think they did it very well.
Oh yeah, and I think the irony is they had basically said, hey, I think you know, after they got signed, hey, I think you ought to go check out this other band. They're called Nirvana. They're from Seattle, and they're the ones that within a sense, maybe I shouldn't say it exactly, but they're the ones that said, hey, you might want to check out this other guy. whenever they got signed. I mean, you know, because, I mean, I think whenever I first got them, they were on Enigma Records for Daydream Nation. And then it wasn't so long before they were picked up by the DGC, David Geffen Records imprint. I'm not sure what the C was. What was the C? I don't know. But still, it was part of that same group where whoever signed Nirvana, they were part of that same office. So, Sonic Youth suggested somebody go look at these guys that were coming out of Seattle called Nirvana. And there you go. The year that punk broke.
Yeah, that's a documentary. I forgot about that documentary.
Yep.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, which is still a very, very fascinating and wonderful look at what that little handprint on the world of music was.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that when we do our 1993 edition too. About how for a very short time it was a really interesting time when the mainstream got co-opted by the underground. It was a very, very cool short but sweet time. But if we're gonna talk,
is for sure.
We're talking about some noisy guitar stuff. I think I've got to mention Ministry's "The Land of Rape and Honey" next. That is one of my favorite albums of the '80s. But I will tell you, when I was with a friend at the high school I went to, and we went to Camelot Music. I think it was in Ridgemar Mall, if I have that right. If I'm right, and I saw that, and I bought the cassette. Now, previous to this, all I knew about Ministry was "With Sympathy," which was, of course, the Revenge song, very synth poppy, and then "Every Day Is Halloween," which was also very synth poppy, a little darker. And then I think there was a song on that album, the 12-inch single, is called like "The Nature of Love" or something like that. Am I getting that right? Which was more abrasive, but it was still, very electronic and very, and not too heavy. So when Stigmata came on, I looked at my friend, and that part where Al Jurgensen goes, ah, and I looked out.
Right?
I was like, I've never heard anything like this before. What the hell is going on? Did I get the right cassette? Is this the Ministry that I was so confused because it was so Stigmata was so demented sounding. It sounded satanic, and I was like, what the hell is this thing? And it blew my mind.
Is there another band called Ministry?
Yeah, I really wondered that. I was really freaked out by it. And I heard that whole album, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys have totally gone a different direction. And it was, and I guess Big Black had predated that album, but I don't know much about Big Black. Speaking about Steve Albini, I've heard about, in recent years, he was kind of very much, kind of combined the whole dance beats and guitars thing. But this is my first experience with a band that really, they were able to combine, like electronic dance beats and metal guitars, and it was awesome. I mean, it was so great because you had like that, then you had The Missing and Dee Dee, which almost sounded like one big song, really, because they kind of have the same kind of riffing. But then you got the weird samples and stuff like Golden Dawn or Flashback, which uses all the samples off of Platoon. Listen to Platoon, you can hear these sound bites coming through that will kind of jump at you stick out like a sore thumb if you heard this album too many times. But I don't know about you, but I thought that Land of Rape and Honey was so bizarre and disturbing, and even the album cover was like some image I think of like a body from a concentration camp, I think. So the whole thing was just mired in this kind of dark misery, but it was also just so chaotic and
totally. I really thought that. Wait, is there another band called Ministry? I mean. Because I was vaguely familiar, honestly, with Sympathy and of course I knew the Halloween, the Halloween remix records and a handful of stuff like that. I mean, it was so wonderfully synthy, I mean, it was, and then all of a sudden. Man, abrasive. I mean, I could have put my face to a cheese grater and been listening to this, and I mean, it was just I felt bloody and just it was chaotic,
violent.
And, I mean, I loved it, but I just thought, what's going on here? Is this the same band? And yeah, it is. I mean, great for them. For being able to do whatever the hell they want to do. I guess. But yeah, this was not your mother's Halloween.
No, it was not. And
No, it was not.
Speaking of mothers, I remember that I had bought this album, and then a while later I bought the Stigmata 12-inch single, which had that Tonight We Murder on the B-side, which is an awesome B-side, a very twisted, weird song. And my mom came in while I was playing that song, and she asked if I was okay. and they were like really freaked out. I was getting like Satan or something. They were very very disturbed by that.
You're not the only one.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain whenever they heard coming out from yeah.
So
I'm fairly certain that I had a. Is everything okay in here?
Yeah. And
I didn't want to say it's ministry because that may have conveyed a whole bunch of. Oh, so he's listening to what kind of ministry? I didn't want to turn those keys.
And that's something too that
my mother.
And that's something kind of funny too. When I first started dating my wife, our first date was a ministry concert, and then literally a week later, we went to see the church, and she's like, "What was all these bands with these religious names?" I'm like, "I didn't even think about that. There were all these bands in the '80s, like the Cult, the Church, Ministry, Sisters of Mercy, Leather Nun. They were all these like kind of blasphemous, religious stuff." Yeah,
right. I mean, it's right in that. It's right in that sort of. What can we do to? I think it's a standout part back then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now you just name it after. Let's see, what's the one that infuriates me? The car seat headrest.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible.
I hate that. Okay, I'll say this: I cannot stand the band name, but if I listen to the music, I kind of don't turn it. But.
It's
it's
a deterrent.
I've apologized to my daughter already. I'm sorry. We've already taken all the great band names.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. We made it difficult.
We've made it super hard for the people that you're going to listen to in the future. We've made it really hard to listen to anything that sounds appealing at all. We got your Cures. We even went French. We went to Depeche Mode.
Yep.
We have Iron Maidens and we have Slayers. I mean, we took them all. I'm sorry. You have to deal with Soccer Mommy.
You guys got the short end of the stick.
You got the short end. So good luck. If you're going to start a band, maybe you can consult with me, but yeah, I mean, coming up with all those names that the bands that we listened to in the 80s, 90s, and whatever, early 2000s even, that borderline, that sort of religious sect, non-religious. Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting, actually. Ooh. That's a whole other podcast. Boy, that's a Church of the Poison Mind right there.
There you go. that could be the name of the podcast episode right there. That could be the name of the
podcast. That's what I'm saying. Thank you, Boy George.
That'd be perfect. Well, you mentioned Slayer. Did you want to talk about South of Heaven at all?
Yeah, well, South of Heaven, gosh, I'm about to see Slayer here in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and final tour, and I'll be 100% honest. It wasn't super high on my radar for South of Heaven. back whenever it was released. It was one of those records that I picked up probably a few months after it came out. But man, I almost, it's like one of those 1A, 1B kind of records. It's not as super duper important, I think, as Rain and Blood is, but it's really stinking close. I think it still keeps within the mindset of what was going on, and the continuation of artistically what they were doing. I can't say anything bad about the record, and I can't say anything totally that sells me on the record as much as I would on Rain and Blood. But it's consistency within that album that just keeps you feeding at the trough.
And I think, if we're going to talk about metal, I mean, I think probably if you had to pick one metal album, just as far as from a sales point and just commercial standpoint, and also just a cultural thing, I think Injustice for All is probably the metal album that defined 1988, just as far as on a worldwide scale.
Yeah, easily.
But
easily does.
But it's a weird album in retrospect because it really is an album where there is no bass. There's no bass.
Right.
They really
hero. Yeah.
They really hazed Jason Newsted, and it's odd to listen to it now. I think.
Oh, he's new, but he's not heard.
No. And I mean, from what we saw the I saw the documentary. I read so much. I think they were really just torn up about losing Cliff Burton and didn't know what to do. But it was a dick move to do that to Jason Newsted. But even still, it's still a really, really good album. I don't think it's as good as Master of Puppets because it doesn't have that bass element. But there's some really strong stuff. I think just Blackened is such a great intro. Talk about a great intro to an album. So
Harvester of Sorrow really gets me.
Yeah,
I really dig that one. But yeah, you're right. The lack of that bass sound. Come on, guys.
It's really odd.
Don't be jerks.
Yeah.
Don't be jerks.
But
I mean, is that? I don't know whose decision that was, but come on.
But I think too, you listen to the album though, it's really definitely one that after this album, they never went this far. This was the most complicated thing they ever put together. There was the most ambitious stuff. You've got, like, Eye of the Beholder, or not, is it Eye of the Beholder?
Yeah.
You got that. You've got To Live Is to Die. And then Dyer's Eve, which is just an crazy, amazing ending track about James Hetfield being raised by a Christian Scientist family and all the confusion he felt and all of that. But it's so intense and so athletic, and I know Lars Ulrich gets a lot of shit for being a bad drummer, which I never quite understood that criticism, because on this album he sounds amazing, I think. But it's almost like this one, after this they were like, okay, we're done with this, we're gonna go make butt rock now, and they never did anything like this.
Yeah, I mean, nothing was ambitious enough after that album. And I think a lot of that had to do with the producing credits. Bob Rock kind of took it down to a very, very domestic level for them, and not their hierarchy of let's trample the world with our artistic selves. They took it down to a different. And I guess it was they were a extremely popular band with that next album, the self-titled or Black album, whatever you want to call it. But I think artistically they went down a notch.
Yeah, they did.
After Injustice.
I mean, it paid the bills for him better. It certainly made him more popular, but it kind of took away that edge that I think made him such a standout for metal at that time.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I mean, they took and I'll be honest, I don't want to complain about the Black Album too much, because if you bring people into the community of metal for being even safe metal, it's still metal.
Mm-hmm.
It's still heavy, and from there, maybe that's your gateway drug, but if you're going to get into the safe part of Metallica, maybe that's going to put you into, hey, what else is out there that's going to be fun and exciting and faster? Because then maybe it's Slayer, and then maybe after that, maybe it's Napalm Death, and then maybe it's Obituary, and so on and so forth. So, I don't know. I mean, Metallica's transition after Injustice, that's on them, and good for them.
And
sell out your
tours. And I was looking at your selection on this list, and we're hitting a lot of the major albums of this year, but there's a lot of quirky kind of under the radar stuff that came out in 1988, and you listed The Godfather's Birth, School, Work, Death, and so I think we should talk about that one a little bit, because that was a fun album. So what are your thoughts about think about that one?
I love that record. That to me was like a Rolling Stones gone psychedelia kind of record. It was such a huge college rock kind of. I saw them at University of North Texas, which is what it was. Now it's North Texas University or something like that. But I saw them up in Denton, and it was. I just love the sort of disconnected lyrical part of them.
Mm-hmm. Very great lyrics.
I mean, the lyrics were fantastic, I thought, and it really stands out whenever. I mean, it's not hard to miss, because it's not like they're buried within a mix or anything like that. Musically, it's just a great rock and roll record. And with what they're singing about, just it's just super basic rock stuff, Say it isn't so, your love is lost, that kind of mentality. It's, to me, it seemed like Rolling Stones psychedelia.
Well, they had that great line in the title track. I get cut, but I don't bleed, because I don't get what I need. I mean, that's such a great line. That's such an awesome, like, punk rock, nihilistic. Yeah. And what a great
nihilistic, yeah.
And what a great song title. Birth, School, Work, Death. I mean, that's just I mean, that's genius, really. It's that's
It really is. It really is. Yeah, I love that record. I loved it to death. And it was super sad now that I didn't buy a shirt at that show, because they had that great sort of the 4 panels that had a Birth, School, Work, Death on it, from whatever, with the great Godfather's logo across the top.
And they had
super sad that I didn't get that, but it was a short show. I mean, you have a record to tour with. You have 12 songs, but good for them.
Yeah.
I was happy to pay for it.
They were just a fun band, because you had they had that "Cause I Said So" was another single off there. Then there's that one kind of the acid tripping with the "When Am I Coming Down" or something like that. I think is what it was. It was real.
Coming Down was a real good trip right there.
And there was another kind of under the radar album that year that I liked a whole lot, and that was Fields of the Nephilim, which is not much of a creative album title there, but I thought
Oh yeah.
I thought those guys were a really cool. They're a really weird goth band because they had this like spaghetti western image. They had this dusty, like they put dust over their clothes, and they almost had like metal vocals too. It was on the
Right. Yeah.
kind of like a Cookie Monster predecessor to those kind of vocals.
Yeah.
And I really, I really dug those guys because they had a lot of horror influence. They had a lot of Aleister Crowley stuff, like a Moonchild, or a lot of H.P. Lovecraft stuff on Last Exit for the Lost and all that. That was a really cool album. I thought it didn't get played a whole lot. It was more like a college radio thing, but I thought they were one of the cooler goth bands that never really they don't get spoken about in the same circles as like Bauhaus, Sister Mercy, or groups like that. But I thought that was a pretty cool album that I dug at least.
Yeah, I remember liking them. I think I remember a story where they got pulled over or denied customs in Canada because what they used on their outfits on stage was flour.
They thought it was cocaine.
And they thought it was cocaine. And so, I mean, so
that's great.
I mean, but they had such a great sound. I remember really liking what I heard from them. They were one of those bands. It was really hard to find that stuff. I think that was part of that rough trade. Stuff back in the late 80s, early 90s stuff. And I'm not sure if they ever moved on to a major label or not. I don't recall.
Yeah,
I don't recall if it moved over.
I think a lot of those bands, they kind of, because that was right at the, it was not too long before grunge hit, and that whole kind of style of music really went out of fashion. So, because there's two other albums from that year that are kind of the similar vein. You got The Mission with Children, which is I think it's probably one of their best albums, and it's produced by John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin, and I think they were kind of riding that wave of like the Cult and other goth band who had kind of gone a little hard rock. So it was much more hard rock, but still very kind of over the top and super ornamental, and very obviously the Led Zeppelin influence is strong on that album. But I thought that was some pretty cool stuff. I think Wayne Hussey is a pretty awesome guitar player with the 12 strings and everything. That was a pretty good, I think a pretty solid record. That
I remember picking up some of those Mission records for sure, because that was really dynamic. Wow, that was great stuff. Great stuff to hear. It was epic. Almost, it was cinematic. Honestly,
yeah, epic
is what it got down to.
That's the perfect description. Very, very cinematic. It was like very super like grandiose, but they pulled it off. I like how they had
Power Strength was. It sounded like it should have been like the opening of like another Hobbit film.
Yeah.
I mean, it was huge. Huge.
And then they had that intro, that Heaven on Earth song, which kept the same beat. So basically, like a 20-minute song. Those two songs, they kept that same little drum line throughout both those.
Right. Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. That was pretty creative.
Yeah.
And
great stuff from those guys, for sure.
Totally. And then we also, I'd say you listed on, you mentioned Smithereens, but I think we probably should be good to talk since Denizio passed away not too long ago. Green Thoughts. So what are your thoughts on Green Thoughts?
But I really loved that record. That was just a straight up great rock and roll record. And that was the first tour that I ever saw them on. Yeah, I was just gonna say that it was just such a standout show. Trevor Rabin from Yes, at the time was at that show.
Really?
And it was just random. Gosh, it was 1989 whenever I saw this show, and Trevor Reagan was just randomly there for whatever reason. Let's see, I'm trying to remember what the guitar player's name, Pat Babchak or something like that. He had just like a cool moment where he just walked all through the club, playing a solo, you know. And it was just a cool moment, and what a great record. I mean, just simple rock and roll. I mean, it wasn't anything, complicated. Green Thoughts was just another solid record from those guys. And I don't know what else to say about it. Only a Memory was a fantastic song.
It was a truly great. What a.
Drowning My Own Tears. Great stuff.
Is that
it was just simple rock and roll show, but that's what made those guys.
No, is that the same album with a Girl Like You? Is that where that song is from, or is that the?
I think that's the next album.
Okay.
11.
Okay.
Where Girl Like You was from.
All right, I'll edit this part out then.
I'm pretty sure that it was Girl Like it was 11.
Okay.
11, and I saw them in, for that tour, but it was at a bigger venue. It was at the locally here. It was the Bronco Bowl.
Well, yeah, because also. And you've got Ziggy Marley, Conscious Party on here, which I think we should throw those two together because a show that I never saw, but a lot of my friends that you probably saw, I didn't get to go, which I was bummed out. Was it called?
Oh yeah.
It was what was it called? It was In Excess. It was Guns N' Roses. It was Iggy Pop.
All Nations tour.
Yeah, Iggy Pop, which I'll get to in a second. Smithereens, Ziggy Marley. Am I missing anybody? Or is that everybody? That's it.
Let's see. In Excess, Guns N' Roses, Iggy Pop, Ziggy Marley.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
And that was kind of like a precursor to Lollapalooza, really getting a bunch of kind of different acts, but in a kind of this, they kind of have the same aesthetic, or at least the same fan base.
And I think it was a unique tour for a year. I don't think this was something that was happening all around the country.
Yeah.
I was in California and received a phone call from a friend of mine, Steve Thompson. He was probably
Oh yeah.
He was like, "Hey man," he was like, "Hey, In Excess is going to be at Texas Stadium, blah, 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 whatever. Tickets go on sale this weekend." I was like, "Oh man, I'm out here in California until XYZ. Do you have the cash or whatever to go pick me up a ticket and I'll pay you back? No big deal." And worked out. So he ended up buying my ticket. And yeah, what a crazy tour. I mean, that tour wasn't happening in Los Angeles where I was at the time.
Yeah.
Nothing like that was being promoted.
Where you would expect it to be.
There was an NXS. Yeah, there was an NXS show being promoted later on for the Calling All Nations tour, as they were promoting it at here, but it was not there with these artists. And so that was a pretty unique event, I thought it was, at least. So.
And I did like that Ziggy Marley album quite a bit. Conscious Party. I thought that was one of the first reggae albums I really kind of got into. What did you like about that album? What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, that was such a fun record. Maybe I should. Because it's supposed to be a thought-provoking record too.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Conscious Party for a reason, but it has all the elements of his dad's reggae.
Yeah.
With pop sensibilities to it, and it does have it does have its entire thought-provoking parts, as well as it has having a good time stuff. You know, I mean, that's reggae in and of itself, if you ask me. Hey, let's have a good time, but hey, let's look out for our brothers and sisters here in, you know, in the world. So it was a good album. It was a good album. We had a lot of fun with that record, you know, and it was certainly a different time where we thought in a worldwide level, you know, and I think it's harder to do now than it seemed to be back then for whatever reason. At least maybe that's just me being like crotchety old 50-something-year-old guy.
It's weird too, because you know we're more interconnected now than ever, but it seems like coming up with those kind of simple but effective social messaging is you know not you don't hear much in music anymore. Music is not politically conscious to that degree much anymore. It's out there, but not it's more pop has kind of overtaken that. It's not really a substance issue right now.
No one's putting together a entire show just to help out saving the kids that are part of, you know, being taken from that. What's that? Hakubande or whatever it is that you know, the girls that were taken from that group. Yeah, I mean, nobody's putting out those social consciousness these days is a lot different from what it was 30 years ago. You know, it
used to be an album. Now it's a hashtag, basically.
And now it's, you know, it's hashtag against ISIS or something like that. And, you know, putting together a conscious effort against a group is just a social media thing. It's not, let's get together as a bunch of artists that are against a volcano in Hawaii. Yeah, you know, or whatever made up thing. You know, it's different now than it would be then, and it's so difficult to be part of a movement that is so huge now.
And I wasn't really going to touch this album, but I think now that you mentioned that, I think maybe I should. You talk about social consciousness, and you think about an album like "Vivid" by Living Colour, which was very groundbreaking for 1988. Even though even though rock and roll was founded by black musicians, the idea of a black hard rock band for some reason seemed very controversial to some people. I don't know why. I guess, well, unfortunately, I do know why with some people, but it was a really strong album. Mick Jagger, if I recall, produced a couple of tracks off of it, I think. But you really got to see Vernon Reid's kind of mad genius as a guitar player. Was so just, you know, leagues around so many other musicians as far as his technical expertise. And also you've got Corey Glover, who's a great vocalist, and you've got, you know, songs like what's that song about, Letter to a Landlord, you know, stuff like that, or even Cult of Personality, which is very much, you know, a song that still holds a lot of weight today with political things going on. I think those guys are really good, and even though that album sold well, I think Living Colour is still pretty underrated, just because I guess, you know, they just aren't seen as kind of outside the circle, just because they don't fit into any neat little niche, you know, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, absolutely agree on all levels of that. That's a very important record for rock and hard rock itself, for the black community too, because not everybody plays like a drum machine or anything like that to put out their music. That was a tremendous record. It still stands as a beacon, I think, to the young people, black, white, Hispanic, whoever it is, put out records like this. They're thought provoking. They are heavy, not just in sound but in content. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff going on with Vivid. A lot of great stuff going on with that record, and that record doesn't know any kind of boundary whatsoever. And it as soon as you hear it, you know how much Vernon Reid is such a great guitarist.
Amazing guitar player. So
yeah, I mean Vernon Reid is unimaginably crazy on that record. Corey Glover's vocals are insane. Just, I mean, everybody on that, let's see, Muzz and Will, I believe, are, Muzz is the bass player and Will is the drummer.
Yep, that sounds right. Yeah, those guys are amazing rhythm section.
Amazing. So, yeah, everyone should look, if you're starting a band, that's a good template to go with. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Nothing wrong with that at all. No. Nothing.
And
Great record.
And I'm
hands down.
And I'm gonna toss the ball back in your court in a second, but before I forget, just because we're talking about the concert with INXS and Iggy Pop and all those guys, Iggy Pop put out an album 1988, which I would not call groundbreaking or socially conscious or anything like that, but I still enjoyed it very much. It's called Instinct. It was a big about face to his previous album, which was Blah Blah Blah, which was a very pop,
blah blah blah,
very
right?
very new wave, very he kind of followed in Bowie's coattails through like the the new wave period. But Instinct, I kind of feel like Instinct was like a reaction or kind of getting the vibe from like the Cult and Guns N' Roses, that it's cool to be hard rock again. He can kind of get back into his Stooges roots a little bit. And it's a super catchy album. It's got Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols playing guitar, who does some really great riffs. And I know it's not one of his best reviewed albums, and it's not really one that I think that people are going to say, if you have to hear one Iggy Pop album, this Instinct would not be it. But I still love it very much. I think it's really fun. It's got a lot of great riffs, good vocals. The title track is amazing.
That is a fun record.
Cold Metal's a blast. Squarehead. I mean,
Cold Metal.
Yeah, I mean, it's you better save a tree. I mean, it's come on, it's awesome. So I don't have a whole lot to say about it because it's a short and sweet album with some really kind of harebrained lyrics, but I love it. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Instinct. And now, do you want to talk about Rattle and Hum?
Oh yeah, so Rattle and Hum.
Or if you have anything to say about Iggy Pop, add on. I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh yeah, no. I was going to say, yeah, that was fun stuff out of Iggy Pop. I mean, that was coming off of, and if you think about where he was headed to next with Brick by Brick.
Yeah, which is another big change.
Which was another tremendous change on his part, but. Yeah, no, that was fun, ridiculous Iggy Pop.
Exactly, yeah.
Within a sense.
Because Brick by Brick was much more kind of adult and more multi-dimensional, and Instinct was not.
Brick by Brick was his AOR record, if you ask me.
Totally. Totally.
And believe me, I'm not gonna put Iggy on any kind of like warning or anything like that. But hey, you know what? Iggy's gonna do what Iggy does, and if he feels it, go for it. And I have no issue with where he goes. The guy's a lot of fun to begin with. So
absolutely.
Now going with Rattle and Home real quick, it came right off of those big Joshua Tree 1987 or not. Well, yeah, it was 1987 whenever those tours were happening, and the film and the soundtrack to the film came out, and I just recently saw U2 and in Nashville, and it was really cool to kind of I stopped in Memphis, and I was at Sun Studio for just a brief moment where they recorded a couple of tracks off of Home, and it was a super cool moment. I mean, not just for that. There's so much great history going on there, but
it's a great place to visit.
Yeah, I mean, it was like going to a Mecca almost.
Totally.
I mean, so many of the great American artists, period, had recorded there. Cash. I mean,
Elvis.
Jerry Lee Lewis. Name it. I'm just so. I get so really just starstruck by it. Cash and Lewis and Carl Perkins. I mean, hey, you know what? Def Leppard recorded there. Come on. I mean, it's stupid. It's stupid. Like how many people have recorded there? You could almost just like throw a dart and try to find somebody that hasn't recorded there. It's that ridiculous.
And it's such a small little studio. If you visit, it's tiny. I mean, I was struck by how small it was when I visited. It's not very big, but man, they know how to capture that sound. Doing something right.
And it's really, really insane. It really is. And so, we were on our way to go see U2 in Nashville and stopped off at Sun Studio. And it just so happened that they recorded a couple tracks off of Rattle and Home there. And that was a super cool experience. Rattle and Home is, it's just one of those like post big album records, I think. And I do think it has some stuff that's really strong on it, like Hawk Moon's 687, 697. I don't remember exactly what it's called.
That's
God of Part 2. God of Part 2 is really strong off that record.
Van Diemen's Land.
Yeah, Van Diemen's Land. The originals on there are fairly good. The live stuff you can certainly go with as well, but that's after being at Sun Studio this within the last couple of weeks and kind of getting that feel. Yeah, Rattle and Home. It is certainly a type of record that is for the collectors. It's not a run out and get it if you're just becoming a U2 fan, but yeah, it certainly is a man. That's got some good stuff. Say that.
Did you happen to see that documentary about Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre that was on HBO?
You know what? I didn't.
Yeah, I forget that.
I didn't catch that.
I forget the name of it. I gotta think of the name of it. but it was really entertaining. It was basically they're just talking about making an Interscope and their career. And Jimmy Iovine was talking, about Rattle and Hum, and Bono basically said that Rattle and Hum was the album that basically forced Jimmy Iovine to quit being a producer because
Really?
he lost his mind. Because I believe they said we broke him. I think that's exactly what he said. I think they said they just wore him out because they was like, because they're trying so hard to top the Joshua Tree, and they kind of got a little over their heads and everything. So it was apparently
yeah, and that, you know what, I think that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to equal it, but
too much pressure.
Yeah. I mean, there's too much going on there. Too much going on. You're balancing it between live tracks and new studio tracks, and that is you're not going to do that.
And another thing too, it's kind of off topic, but did you ever watch the show The Americans at all? Did you happen to see the season finale or series finale?
No, I didn't.
All right, well, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but if any YouTube fans listening to it, they play With or Without You in the final episode, and it's one of the best uses I've ever seen in a TV show of an older song. It's brilliant.
Really?
It was really emotional and striking. And I've watched it 3 times since just to watch that whole montage because it was genius.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you ever get to watch that show, and it's a lot to get, it's probably like 4 or 5 seasons you had to watch, but it's so worth it. It's a great show. But anyways, just they use U2 to masterful effect in that final episode. So
using With or Without You correctly is fine. Yeah, I mean, you have to use that correctly.
And they did it. It was perfect.
Wow. Going from you, fair enough.
And then we've also got Siouxsie and The Banshees with Peep Show. That was another big album from 1988, or at least on a smaller album as far as a grand scheme of things, but it was definitely 120 minutes, was all over Peekaboo for sure. And and I'm sure a lot of hardcore fans maybe wouldn't like it as much as say the older stuff because it wasn't quite as edgy but it's got a really good sound to it, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff.
There's a lot of great sound to it.
It's very diverse.
There's a lot of great stuff. Yeah.
I mean, particularly, I think it's Budgie it kind of owns the album because his drums all throughout are very kind of eclectic and weird, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on. I know the guitarist they had on the album was, I forget his name. He wasn't, it wasn't John McGeoch, or I can't pronounce his name right. John Mgeoch. I'll just say it like that. And then they had another guitarist before that who I'm forgetting. And of course, they had Robert Smith for a while. So they've gone through several guitarists. But it was just a really cool album. But I really liked the song. The Killing Jar was really cool. Ornaments of Gold was really good. And Last Beat of My Heart is probably the best one off there. That's a really good ballad.
Oh, yeah. That's a fantastic song.
That's just so powerful. Yeah. And just, you talk about epic. That's how it's big and grandiose and cinematic as they could get. They really pulled that off, I thought, very well on that record for sure.
No, that's a fantastic album. It really is. It's a super album. I mean, for Siouxsie, kind of, to me, it's almost like a crossover record.
Yeah, because they were
to where I mean that was that Lollapalooza year, I think, within a couple of years of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was part of what instituted, because I think actually Lollapalooza was 91, so this is 88. It kind of helped her into that mix, and yeah, that was a huge thing for her, or for the entire band actually. So yeah, Last Beat of My Heart was an incredible song. I think Killing Jar, I think I may have that 12 inch.
It's such a good track. It's just got a really cool, like it's got that, I don't know, like it's really kind of epic, but it's also got a dark kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? wrong note but played in the right way. I'm having trouble thinking of
right?
it just is very kind of interesting and discordant and I dig it. I think it's a really good album. And
Yes,
and I know
I agree.
earlier you were talking about two different albums that I think we should cover. You talked about My Bloody Valentine isn't anything. You think you had to say a story about that, so I wanted to have you share your thoughts on that one first. Then we can go into REM's Green.
Yeah, it was one of those records that I bought, and I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be awesome. And I listened to it and was like, well, this isn't anything. And I put it away. And I put it away and did not pick it up until like 6 or 7 months later. And because, I it was another one of those that I read it or saw the video on 120, which was a tremendous way to hear new music because, it's not like I was going to get it on the radio or anything like that,
Absolutely.
And so I picked it up and was like not really thrilled with it and set it aside and dealt with it later and decided a few months afterwards, hey, what do I need to get rid of so I can get new stuff? And so I thought, oh, well, let me listen to this one. And then I thought, oh, wait, this was a huge mistake. I should have been listening to this record for the last 7 months. It was such I mean, Kevin Shields probably wouldn't show up huge until later on the next album, but there is no reason why I should have tried to even get rid of this record. It was just boring. And it was more so on the next album. But it was really with this album that I was like, I need to keep all this. I need to keep all their material.
These guys got to go somewhere.
and I nearly got rid of it. I nearly got rid of this album, and then ignored. And Loveless was almost the same way, to where I was like, oh well, I'm going to put it aside.
Well, that's one of those.
And then it was just stupid.
Yeah, but they're one of those bands though that you can't. For me, when I first heard My Bloody Valentine, it was for this. It was on Loveless, and I heard a song in 100 minutes, and I did not like it at all. When I first heard it, it was so abrasive and
right,
and I couldn't,
right.
and I couldn't. And then finally, my friend's like, "No, you gotta give it a shot. You gotta listen to it more and more." And so it wasn't until like a year later I actually listened to it again. I'm like, okay, I get it, and I became a big fan of them. But they definitely, because their sound was so intense and so dissonant, which is the word I was trying to think of earlier for Siouxsie and the Banshees, but so dissonant.
Right.
And so buried that it just takes your brain a while to wrap around it. At least it did for me, because it wasn't so, the layers are so dense that you have to really kind of give it. It's almost like a science experiment to listen to My Bloody Valentine. But once you get into it, you love it. And I don't know, did you ever?
Yeah.
I wrote about meeting Kevin Shields a while back. Did you read that thing I wrote a while back? It's been a while. But I saw him play with Primal Scream on the I think it was on the what's the album, Exterminator tour, like in 2000.
Oh, did you?
And it was awesome. And so he's playing, and I was deaf after the show because he's playing so loud. And that was in the years where people were saying they're ever gonna make a new album, and they bankrupted Creation Records trying to make this new album. It never happened. So afterwards, I was backstage hanging out with them, and Bobby Gillespie was kind of nice, but they're all were definitely, have been imbibing on some substance or another. And I'm all
awesome.
I'm all nervous, so I'm trying to think of something to say. I should have just left, but I turned to Kevin Shields and I said,
really good.
I said, so how's that new My Bloody Valentine album coming?
Right.
And his response was, I'm fucking working on it, okay? And I was like, oh, okay, sorry. I am an ass. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I had to ask. But yeah, it was.
Oh my God.
It was awkward. It was awkward. My friend was laughing so hard. I'm like I had to ask. And the guy, he looked like I had just ruined his whole night. So sorry, Kevin Shields. But I'm glad they're supposed to put a new album pretty soon. An album this year, I think. So at least they're back now. But at the time, he did not want to hear about it. So that's the story I recall.
That's great.
And hilarious. Yeah, he was not pleased with me. But
that is the best. He was not pleased with me.
He was not. But
Evan Shields, because he's pleased with so many of us.
It was one of those things that, like, as soon as you open your mouth, you know that you're like, oh, it's too late to stop now. I can't stop, and there it is. It was really embarrassing, but yeah, it's funny. It's funny in retrospect, but
I love that. That's my favorite story.
Oh yeah, it was really because the look on his face was priceless. I mean, he was so mad. He was so mad, and then he got just kind of dejected. And I was standing there just talking.
So what's going on?
Yeah. But what was really funny is like I looked over and Manny from the Stone Roses was playing bass for them right there, and he was like trying not to laugh, like he had this big grin on his face, because this must happen all the time, So I just was
okay, I like that even better now.
Yeah, I just
Manny was over there kind of like,
I'll try not to crack up.
You asked the wrong question, man.
Oh, it was great. Oh, it was so funny.
Oh, that's great.
But I get
that's you win story of the night.
But I guess
I love that.
We're gonna speak about temperamental musicians. I guess I should go ahead and give a shout out to the self-titled debut of Danzig came out in 1988.
You do that. That's all you.
That's all me. And that came out in 1988. Rick Rubin produced it. I've actually been trying to get John Christ to do an interview to talk about his album. He's not returning my phone calls. So I don't know if he doesn't want to talk about it.
Oh, no.
But
Do I need to call him?
Yeah. Give. So I'm still trying.
He'll answer my phone call.
Yeah, I'll give him your number.
Yeah.
If he doesn't answer, I may try Erie Vaughn. See if I get him to say something. But
all right.
Or maybe they have a gag order and he hasn't let them talk. I don't know. But I think Danzig is it's an interesting album because it's Rick Rubin produced it. He also produced The Cult Electric, and there's a lot of parallels between both those albums. There's very similar. I think
totally. Yeah.
They both have that kind of Angus Young or Malcolm Young good guitar sound. They're very truncated, kind of bright distortion. They've also got two vocalists. I think Ian Astbury and Glenn Danzig are very similar. They both have that kind of Jim Morrison thing going on. I think Danzig a little more bluesy, and Ian's probably a little bit more technically a better singer, just overall. But I think that they're very comparable to that. Danzig, the first time had Mother on it, and that was not a hit until like 1993 or something crazy like that, when it was like re-released on that live single. And I don't know why it took him that long, but part of it.
That's weird, isn't it?
It was really weird, but part of it I think was because of MTV, because I actually we may have been watching it the same night. I seem to think I remember seeing them watching this with like you guys and Judson, whatever, watching Headbangers Ball. But I remember they play that that Mother video, right? Where like they have the Santorini and they kill the chicken and put the blood over the woman, And MTV only played that one time, and I saw it. I think we all, at least in my mind, that we all watched it together. But I know that they banned it afterwards, and I think a lot of the issues with Danzig was he was deemed as satanic and evil and all that kind of stuff, but it just made him more irresistible for metalheads, because there's such a it's such a great blues rock album, and like Twisted Canes, the riffs are so much fun. I mean, they're all the pinch
Oh,
harmonics.
Twisted Cane. Yeah.
She Rides, uh, Am I Evil, Not of This World. It's just a really solid album, and I think that Danzig, as much as he can be a caricature, he was cool when I talked to him. It was a really weird conversation. Hearing Danzig laugh a whole lot was something I was not expecting. It was really, really fun to talk to, but you know, reputation otherwise, that's I think a really strong rock album, and definitely a really fun one.
Yeah. You know, he was a guy in my Fun Fest that needed French onion soup. So.
Yeah,
you know, I'm not gonna bag on the guy. Sorta, but not totally. I still think it's funny.
Well, yeah.
You know, the whole context. I don't know exactly what happened in the whole scene between them and promoters and what have you, but you know, it still seems kind of funny.
He's definitely,
you know, French onion soup, you know, and I need heaters and
he's
you know, whatever, you know.
He's definitely.
You know, I'm not gonna call him out or anything like that. But you know, hey, you know what? Standing.
And another, I'm not gonna talk about this a great deal, but another album I wanted to mention, a good hard rock album from that year was the L.A. Guns debut album. Was actually another fun rock album from that year.
That is certainly on your radar.
And that was, you know, I mean, Guns N' Roses, you know, before Guns N' Roses became Guns N' Roses, there was Tracy Guns, who was a guitarist for a brief while. Then he went and broke off and did L.A. Guns, which they're not nearly as good as Guns N' Roses. They don't have the same kind of transcendent thing that Guns N' Roses were able to do with the different types of styles and all that. But as far as just a good hard rock band with a little bit of a kind of biker attitude and all that, it was a fun album. Sex Actions is a great riff. No Mercy's a great song. There's lots of good. And actually, I saw them last year. My wife and I went and saw them at this.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we saw them at this dump club. I found out they were playing the night before, and I was like, you know what? Let's go see L.A. Guns. This is a night to see L.A. Guns. And we saw this club that looked like it was. I feel like I've been transported back to 1988. It was just a dump. It looked like a fire trap. I thought if anything gets catch fire, we're gonna all die in this thing. And it was just, you know, like 10 people. It was not a big crowd or anything like that, but they sounded really good. I was actually really.
Did you take the wife?
I did. Yeah, she had.
Oh yeah.
She had heard a couple songs.
She was in.
Yeah, because I made her a couple of mixed CDs a while back. Like I put Never Enough and stuff. So yeah, it was actually that was a fun show. Tracy Guns is a really good guitar player, so that was a fun rock album. Now I know. Well, another thing I see on your list, you mentioned that we should probably talk about, since I believe today was Prince's birthday, if I'm correct. Love Sexy was on your list, and I think given
Love Sexy.
That's one we should probably discuss.
Oh yeah, because I'll be honest, I liked Love Sexy. I really liked Love Sexy. That was the first tour that I saw from him. In the fall of '88 with. Do you remember Rachel Graves?
Oh yeah. I'm Facebook friends with her.
Yeah. I'm sure you're Facebook friends with her. Yeah, we went to see, and actually, she sent me a picture a day or two ago. Hey, look, I found my Love Sexy ticket. You know. Yeah, I've had that forever. I got it. That's awesome. But that's really nice that she held on. You know, she held on to it. You know, it was such like a strange tour because you know it's way off of the entire Purple Rain phenomenon that happened, and so you're working with a different type of Prince at that point. You know, everything is there's so much stuff that he has at this point that he's trying to shove it all into a show. You know, there was still part of Sign of the Times and things like that he was pouring into there. But as far as Love Sexy goes, man, I loved that record. I loved whenever I try to put the album onto my actual like iTunes, it came up there as one solid track. And that's it. Because everything came up as one solid track. I mean, it was like 43 minutes of one track. And I'm like, man, are you freaking kidding me? But, you know, good for you, guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only...
it's hard to differentiate it, but whatever.
Yeah, I think the only really problem that Love Sexy has, it just had to come on the tail of Sign of the Times, which is, I think, probably his best record. So I think it's just one of those things that it was a good album, but it just, Sign of the Times was such a massive, commercial and critical success. It was just hard for anything to kind of be is that high profile, I think, which I think is probably the main reason that Love Sexy maybe didn't get the same attention that maybe it deserved.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's still solid. It's still solid stuff, but it's not. I mean, yeah, we get it. It's not Purple Rain, but if you ignore the couple records after that, man, you're not paying attention. You're just not paying attention.
Speaking of Purple Rain, and speaking of Peter Murphy, I should have segued this earlier, but I'm just not thinking about it. but I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it. But Love Hysteria came out in 1988, and that was his second solo album. As the first one, I thought it was his first one. I didn't discover his first solo album until years later. But that was a very fun almost poppy album that saw him kind of mix in like his goth stuff, but he definitely was trying to get more mainstream on that, but it was still really good. I thought there was some really good songs on there. Like,
certainly was the one that received a whole bunch of reception from the old 120.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being absolutely bored to death that they were always playing all night long. Right. All night long. They played all night long. and there was a point to where it was like, come on, guys. I mean, you're not going to play the songs that I want to hear. I know, but still.
Yeah, they definitely.
Yeah, that was. There was a lot of singles within a sense that were very far away from happening. So yeah, solid record, love it. Would totally buy into it and promote it. It's such a good record.
Because he also had Indigo Eyes, which is a very, that's another kind of big single off it. But also, I think my favorite song is My Last 2 Weeks, which is the last track on there, which is just a great, great, one of those great closing tracks that, it's just perfect to end on an album. Also really, really solid.
Absolutely. I was always a fan of, what was the one, let's see. Pythagoras.
Oh yes, Socrates the Python.
Socrates by the Python. Yes, that was a huge. I love that song. That was my favorite.
That was very Bauhaus. That was probably the most Bauhaus thing on that album. Very goth.
It was very strong Bauhausing on that record.
which is why I liked it, I think.
Yes, I think so.
I think so. Now
You
also had on here the Pogues. Did you want to talk about that one?
such such a great record, but you have to actually like pull out the Fairy Tale of New York, because it seems to be a alternative to the Christmas season that people have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The I hear in some settings in which is strange, because I've heard it here and there. I don't think I've heard it a whole bunch. I mean, there's the whole "you scumbag, you maggot, you cheap, lousy faggot," and I don't think they buy into that verbiage anymore. And I get that. That's great, but it really is. It really is. I mean, altogether, if you take out even just that one single song, the Fairy Tale of New York, there's a lot of great shindigs. I guess you might say a lot of great just dance tunes within the sense. And I love that record so much. It was just it's Irish, which is part of my heritage.
Mine too.
But without being totally stupid. There's some complexity going on lyrically, and musically it stays true. And I really appreciate it. And it's such a good record, and I have so much fun with it, and I will always listen to that record. No doubt.
Speaking of fun records, I think I've got to give a nod to They Might Be Giants' Lincoln, which is another.
Oh yeah.
another big indie album of 1988, which.
That is a very indie album.
I think what I liked about those guys, which what I later learned to like about Ween, was like, okay, these guys aren't just good musicians, but they're also got a really weird sense of humor, which I have. Like it was a very.
Right.
It's almost like cartoon music in some ways. They got a very Purple Toupee sounds, is so out there. Anna Ing. It's funny. It's so out there. And what's really weird is I was actually watching Mickey Mouse Clubhouse with Ruby. She's obsessed with Minnie Mouse and all that. And we were watching it,
right.
and they've got this song I think called "Hot Dog," that everything.
Yeah.
And I was watching the credits, and They Might Be Giants wrote that song.
They did.
They Might Be Giants. That's all of them. I had no idea. So yeah, they did the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse theme song, which is really weird. So that kind of.
My daughter watched the same show, and then I was like, there were these guys that were singing "Hot Dog."
Yeah, that's them.
Hey, I think I know that voice, and then, yep, that's them.
So maybe
They Might Be Giants. That's funny.
That's really weird. And then of course another really fun pop album of that year was The Innocents by Erasure, which I thought was a really solid.
Oh yeah.
Really great synth pop album, and
yeah.
I mean, I think A Little Respect is one of the best singles of the '80s by far. It's just such a great song.
That's such a great song.
Andy Bill sing his ass off on that song. But I think Erasure were able to do something that a lot of people couldn't, which was like very poppy stuff, but still have this kind of a little bit of an edge to it. And there's definitely some social conscious lyrics for sure. Obviously it was not being subtle about having a gay singer, and then not being subtle about lyrics that hit on that, but it wasn't alienating. I don't think the people who may have been unsure or didn't know what was going on with those guys, but I think it was just a really strong album. Ship of Fools is a great song.
You know what? I don't think the pressure was on Erasure as much as it was on like a Depeche Mode or any of those other, supposed synth bands that would happen. I think they felt very, whoever it was that signed them, Sire I think was a record label, but they felt very comfortable with that, and so they could be who they were, and musically, where if you were Depeche Mode, then you were Depeche Mode, or if you were like Depeche Mode, you were like Depeche Mode. Erasure was not like that. Of Vince Clarke's other projects, aside from Depeche Mode.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there was a lot of freedom that he felt with that, and that shows. I think melodically, I think songwriting. Depeche Mode could not have done Chain of Fools. They could not have done A Little Respect. There was no way that they could have done those records. None whatsoever. Vince Clarke found the right guy with Andy Bell and created that sound. And it's just as everlasting as Depeche Mode, if you ask me.
I think it's so weird too that you listen to like Yaz or Erasure, and there's both two duos that have a singer that sound somewhat androgynous. They both have similar voices, and yet no one else sounds like those two singers. It's very strange to me. Like, I've never heard anybody that sounds like those two singers, yet they both have a similar tonality to their voice, which I always thought was kind of interesting. Obviously, Vince Clarke had a very specific sound in his mind when he found those two singers. So they really, Alison Moyet and Andy Bell are two of the greats for sure. Okay, so which album do you want to tackle next?
I'll point out the Arnie and Green for the reason that that album came out the day of Election Day, 1988, and I went and voted democratically, which was not successful, but anyway, that record coming out that day, that was a statement, I think, within the. I mean, not that you didn't know that within the band. They were progressives. They leaned within a democratic sense. But yeah. So I mean, I remember that day. I voted, and then I went and bought that record. And there you go. Lots of good stuff. I still like the album. I'm still a fan of the album. Just like a lot of, REM is the American U2.
Yeah, that is true.
There's hardly anything that I don't like from REM. It'd be harder for me to tell you what I don't like from REM.
But
Green, I like Green. I like Green front to back. From the, I think it was Pop Song 89 or 88 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of it. I mean, there's nothing about the record that I don't appreciate. It would not. I would still tell my kid to listen Go listen to that record. Nothing wrong with that album at all.
It also felt like very much like a transitional record too. Because you've got Document, which was kind of their first big album, and then was it Out of Time that came after that? Was that the one?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so Green
and Out of Time was the big Losing My Religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was probably their biggest album. But Green is a good transitional album, I think. Not just for fans, but also for the band.
Yeah, it still kept the Document sound per se, without having the overbearing singles.
Well, my friend, I think we have covered 1988. I think we've done it.
Yeah, it's been a solid year.
It really was a solid year. Because 87 was kind of, to me, one of the big years where you saw the tide that was turning for alternative music. But 88 was really where you saw kind of the alternative indie thing really kind of dominate a lot of the music scene. It wasn't.
I agree.
Wasn't outselling a lot of those bands that were on pop radio or the hair metal stuff, but it was kind of right underneath the surface. It was just kind of right underneath the surface. They were traveling the same circles. You knew that Guns N' Roses and Jane's Addiction bumped into each other on Sunset Boulevard. They may not have liked each other, but they knew each other. So there was definitely kind of these two different things.
Oh yeah.
It was definitely.
Oh yeah.
And then by 89, which we will get to at some point, things were even. It got disintegration. So that'll be for another day. But I think we.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we've done it, and
awesome.
This is a lot of fun, dude. I've enjoyed catching up with you.
Hey,
I mean, it's Facebook.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much. I feel really honored to be part of your podcast session.
Oh, absolutely.
You got a lot of great people on this. So thank you very much for including me.
Yeah, so we'll get together soon and talk about the best of 1993, and of course we've got some other things in the irons in the fire too. Awesome. So it'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thanks, Michael.
Thanks to Chris for talking to me today. It's a lot of fun catching up with him and talking about some of our favorite albums from 1988. As we discussed, we're going to be doing 1993 in the near future. We'll be discussing our favorite albums from that year. We've got some other ideas for some other podcast episodes as well. It should be a lot of fun. I've got several different ideas in my brain that I want to discuss with him, so we'll do that. So thanks for tuning in. Until then, take care. And as promised, for you Spotify premium members, we get to listen to several select tracks off of some of our favorites of 1988. So enjoy that. Take care and talk to you soon.